Please stand by. Good day, everyone, and welcome to today's Technical Thursdays AFP to PDF Transformation Web Seminar hosted by Actuate and Xenos. This program is being recorded. We hope you enjoy the program, and thank you for taking the time to be with us. Now, if you're having any difficulty logging into the web presentation, you may reach VisionCast Web Technical Support by calling 888-334-0282, or you can call 719-457-2792. Now, all audience lines will be in a listen-only mode during the program. However, you are encouraged to submit web questions throughout the conference by clicking on the Q&A link at the top of your screen. A box will appear on the screen in front of you. Simply type in your question and then click on the Ask button. Our speaker will be addressing web questions at the conclusion of today's presentation, and any web questions that are not addressed within our available time frame will be answered by way of a post-conference email. Now, to view today's web presentation at full screen, which is highly recommended, especially during the demonstration, please press the F5 tab on your keyboard, or you can locate the Maximize Screen icon located in the lower right corner of your screen console. Simply press F5 again if you would like to ask a web question. And at this time, I would like to introduce our speaker. Joining us today is Will Davis. Will Davis is the sales engineer at Xenos and has been in the information solutions industry for over 10 years and has worked at Xenos for over 8 in a number of capacities, including professional services, product development, product management, and most recently, sales and marketing. He has designed and implemented systems for financial services, insurance, ports, manufacturing, healthcare, and telecommunications. Xenos designs, stores, and delivers high-volume print and electronic documents for top-tier organizations in financial services, insurance, telecommunications, and utilities. So now, for opening remarks and introductions, I would like to introduce and turn the program over to Will Davis. Please go ahead.
Thank you. As you mentioned, my name is Will Davis. I will be going over this training session today. Not sure what it said in the emails because I didn't really read them, but this is going to be a pretty basic training session. It's only about 30 minutes and really just meant to set a baseline for future training sessions, get you introduced to Developer Studio, do a quick transformation from AFP to PDF, run that through a process flow, and then automate that as well by listing on a directory. So I'm just going to share my desktop here. And this will bring, hopefully everybody can see this. Just waiting for that to come up on the other screen there. Okay. So what we're going to be doing for this training session, we're just going to be working off of this main directory here called Web Training. And what we're going to do is we're going to receive an AFP file in the sample directory. If I open that up, it's going to be a simple banking statement that should hopefully look relatively familiar. It's included within our samples, and we also use it in various other web demonstrations as well. So it has the title slide, it has a couple images, it has 2 different fonts within it, and it also has some tabular data. So what I'm going to be doing with that is I'm going to be transforming that to PDF, and then I will be running that within a process flow, and then I'll be setting up an event that will listen on the file system in this input directory. And once it's received, we will transform that through the process flow. So to get started, I'm going to go into Xenos Developer Studio here. If you're familiar with our products, you know that this is where we do all of our implementations. Document transformation, data transformation, process flow design, component configuration, and event configuration, as well as deploying to a server environment to run in production. So the first thing I'm going to do here is I'm going to mount that file system that I just showed you. So I'm just going to navigate to that particular directory here. I'm going to mount that, make sure that that's the correct directory actually. So I'm just going to mount that. And what that's going to do is that's just going to mount that directory within my file systems tab. Mounting a directory is really just mounting a grouping of files that pertain to a specific project or whichever else. So in this particular case, I have this web training folder here and this directory structure which I just showed you. And here's the sample that we had earlier. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to create that document transformation that's going to take that AFP and run it out to PDF. So I'm going to create a new component here. And I'm going to go under Processes. And our document transformation used to be called D2E Vision, so it's going to be under the D2E Processes. We'll just do the Run Vision component. And that's going to take us through a wizard, which is going to let us set up how that actually works. Just going to give it a simple name here, AFP to PDF. We could use different names up here if we wanted to, but I like to just type in my own. Now I'm going to go next. And in this screen, we're going to set up the font correlation table. So if I already set up some transformations using this AFP or AFPs built by the same system with the same font, then I could actually bring in one of those MFCTs into this project. Because this is the first part of our training, we're actually just going to create a new one and click Next. Now this will bring us into how we actually set up the transformation and what we want to do. So as mentioned earlier, we're going to be going from AFP and we're going to be going out to PDF. It's important to note here that all of these are independent of one another. So it doesn't matter if you're going from PCL or AFP or even line data. You can generate any of the things that we can generate on the output, such as TIFF, PDF, metacode, PCL, AFP, etc. In the middle here, we do see a bunch of components which we're not going to use in this particular training session, but we will definitely use them later on. So we have the indexer, we have the Xenos Field technology, which enables us to pull information out of the print stream. We can rotate pages. We can add in images, we can add in barcodes, we can remove text as well if we wanted to, or even move them around on the page. But like I said, this is going to be a really simple training session, which is just going to take us from AFP to PDF and get you familiarized with the tool itself. Because I like to go through wizards and because this is the first time that you're going to see this, I'm going to use the wizards for actually setting up the AFP parser as well as the PDF generator. I'm going to go finish, and that's going to take me into the AFP parser itself. Again, just like the font correlation table, I can model this off of another project that I may have created previously based on the AFP. So I could go and select that project here. But since, once again, this is new, we're just going to click Next and set it up ourselves. In this screen is where we actually set up the input and any of the external resources that go along with this AFP. Now, you already saw the AFP. It was, all the resources were inline. I didn't, just because this is a training session, but if I did have external resources such as peg segments or Goka objects or fonts that I wanted to use, I could actually bring all of those in here as well, just as simply as I added the file earlier. In addition to that, we can also, while we're reading in the AFP, we can actually export all of the elements of it as well. So if I wanted to create page segments from the input, I could actually export those to places as well. And of course, we have the tuning section down here. Once you start testing things and load testing things, we can actually set up the tuning there. So I'm just going to click Next, and that's going to bring me into how we can actually set up this AFP. Where is it coming from? Is it coming from a mainframe, a Unix system, a Windows system? All of that stuff can get set up here because the different systems will set up the file differently for the AFP. If I click Next, we'll then go into how the additional settings that we can set. So this AFP file that I'm bringing in is 45 pages. If I only wanted to read maybe the first page or maybe the first 5 pages, I could set that up in the page range here. And I can also set up the page size. This is going to be a standard letter size of 8.5 by 11. But if we had a legal, we could easily bring that in as well, and you can see that it's going to modify the width and the height here. You can also bring in some AFP characteristics, such as the TRC, or the carriage control file, just to control how we're actually going to read it, and also set up and add any start page definitions or start form definitions if those actually existed. Now, this is a simple AFP, so we don't actually have to set any of this. I'm going to finish this, and that's going to conclude the AFP setup. And now it'll bring us into the PDF generator wizard. Again, just like the AFP, just like the font correlation table, we can actually generate this PDF based on another PDF generator that we set up somewhere else in a different project. We don't have that set up, so we're just going to go next. And now we can actually set up how we're going to output everything and how it's going to work for the PDF generator. I have this output file here, which is essentially all I'm going to use. So I'm going to go to this output directory and just put in output.pdf. And I'm going to click OK. If we want to set up anything else, such as the font metrics or the font binary tables, we can set all that up here as well as the tuning and any streamed output options just to stream out the output while we're writing it out. This is really just for, once again, configuring it so that it can run most efficiently within your environment. We're not going to go through that in this training, but so we'll click Next. Because there are a bunch of things that you can do within the PDF generator, we can actually kind of shorten the wizard as we go through it. So in this screen, I'm going to select what I actually want to set up for the PDF output. I'm going to set up these 4 different things: basic document options, some compression, how it's going to be opened, and the PDF authorship metadata that goes along with it. I go next. In the basic document options, this is really just how we're going to output the pages from the AFP onto the PDF pages. So if I wanted to shift the position of the page, if maybe it was a little off to the right, I could shift that to the left, or if it was down a bit, I could shift it up, or just move it around on the page. I could also, if the page was actually a bit larger in the AFP and I just wanted to go out to a standard page in the PDF, I could scale it down as well, so you don't have to worry about items going off the page. Once again, we're just going to keep this all similar. I'm going to go next, and we can set up the compression options. There are a bunch of different compression options that you can set in the PDF. You can compress the text within the PDF, you can compress the images within the PDF. You can also compress any fonts that are embedded within the PDF file. We're going to leave these as a default, which is essentially compress everything that you can. It is worth noting, though, that if you do have the compression on, it's obviously going to affect the generator speed, but it should still be fairly quick in this instance. I'm going to go next, and now I can set up how this is actually going to be opened. So when I open this PDF, or when your customer opens this PDF, what's actually going to be shown? Are the bookmarks going to be shown? Is it going to be full screen? Is it going to be a thumbnail, just the document itself? And where do we actually want to display this? Do we want to display this as up in the top left hand of the screen, or just front and center on the page, and whatever else? All that stuff gets set in the PDF there. If I click Next, I can now set up the PDF authorship, who the author is. Obviously, it's going to be me. What the creator is it going to be, Venus Developer Studio, or do we want to use something else? Any keywords, if we're searching through metadata for specific PDFs, and of course a title and a subject. I'm not going to set any of those, and I'm just going to go Finish. What we're going to see here is it actually already set up the project. If I ran this right now, it'll finish. I can view a log, and I can actually see everything that's occurred within this transformation. I can see how the fonts were managed. I can see how images were managed. I can also see how long it took. In this particular instance, it took 750 milliseconds for the 45 pages. Maybe not a great time, but it could definitely be improved with subsequent transformations. So if I ran this again, it should actually be quite a bit quicker because everything's been loaded. So now we can see 45 pages in 240 milliseconds. So if I go over to results, I can actually see what was output there. So I'm just going to double click on that, and I can see that I have a full PDF output. So that was fairly simple. We went through the wizards, set up the AFP, set up the PDF, and we automatically get some output here. I'm just going to close this, otherwise I'm going to get errors later on. But sometimes you might want to change some things. So I'm going to go into the page view, and the page view, if we didn't set up the AFP properly, this is where we would actually go just to see what exactly is happening. You know, maybe fonts weren't brought in properly, maybe images are missing, and whatever else, the resources themselves. So when I go into page view, I can see how we're actually reading the AFP and how we're managing the resources themselves. The other great thing about this view is we can actually go into and we can actually see every element on this page. I can see that there are 284 words here. Best, bank, infinite gold, the value goes on and on. If I wanted to find out more about this particular word, I could just double click on it and I can see all the font information around that, where it's coming from, the typeface that we're using, and any of the attributes such as is it a double byte, is it fixed width, or does it scale based on the letter itself, and the point size. You can also go over to character information if I want to see what the byte codes were or the Unicode values. Now I can also see positional information, where on the page it actually is. So I can see that this is the bounding box is at these particular coordinates, and I can also see that the baseline is at 78,000. This stuff really comes in handy when you actually want to pull information off the page. We're not going to do that in this particular training webinar, but in the next webinar we will actually be using some of this stuff. Some other stuff you can do here, a lot of the problems that people might run across is actually mapping fonts between different families or just different names themselves. So from here we can actually set up the fonts right within this view, and I could change maybe the output font to perhaps Courier. And if I click OK, I can actually see those results immediately and how that's actually going to pick up within the AFP. So if you did want to change your fonts around, fairly simple to do. Now that really made it ugly, so I'm just going to go back in there and I'm going to change that back to Helvetica. Click OK, and I'm going to save it. Now, just to go over some of the other things that we can see here, obviously there are 284 words. We don't see any images, but that's because those actually exist in forms. So we can see that we have two images. We have this Best Bank logo here, and we have the logo down this image right here as well. So this really just enables you to go into the AFP and actually see what's happening within it and modify the font correlation and just ensure that we're actually reading it properly before actually running the transformation and viewing your PDF. I'm going to close out of this, bring us back into a view that we're more common with so we can see everything. And essentially this transformation is done. We've gone from AFP to PDF. So I'm just going to close this and we'll be brought back to the welcome screen here. Now, as I mentioned before, what we really want to do is we actually want to run this through a process flow and then kick it off on an event. So I'm going to set up a process flow by right-clicking on process flows, going into new component. There's a lot of components within here. You can see that there's some custom components that perhaps you can create to do some processes, a bunch of other things. Under processes, though, we can see the process flow here. So I'm just going to go next, and that asks me to give it a name, so I'm just going to give it a quick name here. Go finish. It's good to bring up the process flow itself. It's always the same. We always have a start and an end. Once this process flow gets kicked off, it's going to come in through the start, and whatever happens in here is going to happen, and then the process flow actually ends once the line ends up down here at the end. We can also see this catch-on error here. So A process flow itself can contain components, it can contain transformations, and they can also contain other process flows. So this catch-on error actually enables us to do processing if an error actually occurred within this process flow. Maybe the AFP file is invalid, or maybe we're trying to write it out to an FTP site. We can't connect to that FTP site. Errors happen, so this catch-on error actually enables us to kick off a process flow if we wanted to, or even just send off an email alert off to somebody. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to drag on that transformation project that we created earlier. We can just drag that onto the palette here. We can connect it to start. I'm also just going to give it a quick name here. And we also want to write that out. So under processes, I didn't really go into those much earlier, but we have all these enterprise server components. We have about, I don't know, 40 or 50 components, maybe even 60. I'm not quite sure. I haven't counted them. But underneath here, we have a bunch of different things, such as communicating with FTP sites, or sending out emails, or invoking a web service. We have some routers so we can route on data. All of this stuff we'll go over in future training activities, but for right now we're just going to keep it simple and write out to a file. We're going to use a single use. If I already created a file process, I could reuse that file process. So I'm just going to click OK here, and I'm going to connect it. And then I'm going to connect it to end and just rename this. If I go into this process here, just like everything else, we have a wizard to actually set it up. So I'm just going to go next here, tell it where to write the file. Same as before, I'm just going to write it out to output.pdf. Then in the next screen, it's actually going to give me some options as to how I want to write this out. Sometimes files already exist there. As you're most likely aware, there's already an output.pdf there that I created when I ran the transformation earlier. Maybe I don't really want to overwrite that. I could append it, I could prepend to that file, or I could actually append a unique ID, which essentially allows us to create as many files as we want, and we don't have to worry about anything being overwritten. So I'm going to do that. I'm going to click Next. While it might not seem relevant for the file process, I mean, if you're writing to a local disk, hopefully there should never really be an error there. But if you're writing to a network location, or maybe if you're writing out to an FTP site, every now and then connections go down or disks get full or whatever else. So this enables us to set up any retries that we want to do. So I can set up 0 retries, which essentially means it's going to run forever until it can actually write out to the disk. And any time between the retries, 5,000 seconds, milliseconds. Okay, I'm going to click Next here. Now I can just use some metadata around what I want to do. That all looks pretty straightforward. I'm going to write out to output.pdf. I'm going to append a unique ID, and the buffer size is 5,000, so on. Okay, I'm going to click Finish, and this process flow is complete. I'm just going to reorganize this because my screen's a bit smaller than I'm used to, and I'm going to close that down. So now we've set up that process flow. We set up the transformation within that process flow. Now we're just going to set up a way of actually automating that. So if I right-click on Events, I'm going to create a new event, which is going to enable me to listen on a directory. Now, events themselves are really just listening for system events to occur. If you wanted to put your file on an FTP site and you wanted us to pick it up, or your trading partner is putting a file on an FTP site, we could go out to that FTP site and grab it once it arrives. If it gets put on a messaging queue, such as MQ series or JMS or even Microsoft's messaging queue, we can go out there and grab it as well. In this particular case, like I mentioned, we're just going to listen to a file system, but rest assured, everything else is fairly simple to set up as well. So I'm just going to go Next. Again, I can just use the wizard. I'm going to give it a name here. Listen for files. I'm going to go Next. I'm going to go Next again, and now we can actually add the directories that we can scan. We could add multiple directories if we wanted to. I'm just going to listen to that input directory that we set up earlier. Input. I could put a filter on there if I only wanted to run through AFP files or text files, and this just takes a regular expression. Once you pick up the file, we don't know how big this file is or how long it's going to take to run. So what we do, so that we don't pick it up every single time that we pull that directory, we rename it. So we'll rename it to _running when it's running, and once it's finished, we'll rename it to _finished. That way, our file event knows it's either running or finished, and also you know it when you look through your directories. You could also delete the file after it's processed if you wanted to, and this case sensitive is really just for Unix-based systems where case sensitivity on the directories and file names actually matters. I'm going to click Next here. I don't really need to add extra directories here. I'm only going to listen on one, but if I want to listen on 1 or 5 or 10, I could add some more here as well. I'm going to click Next. Set up the process to run here, but I'm just going to leave that. And the input map name is going to be data to convert. I'm going to copy that because I'm going to need to go back into the process flow to modify how all that stuff as well. I'm going to go Next. Just like with the file process, I can view the metadata associated with this. I'm going to click Finish here. Okay, so this is the simple event screen. It hasn't actually been attached to a process flow. So I'm just going to drag the process flow on here, and now I've attached it. So once a file gets picked up, it's going to kick off this process flow. I'm going to quickly go into the process flow again. You saw that data to convert earlier. Once these processes actually run, or once the file picks up a file, obviously in memory, in some location, we have the file that we picked up. So we really need to know how we're actually going to call that and where it resides. Because once this transformation runs, we're going to have that AFP input file, but we're also going to have that PDF output file. Both those files are going to be available, so I then have to modify the right file to disk or the file process so we know which file we're actually going to use on the output. So the first thing I'm going to do here is I'm just going to view the mappings. Now there's a lot of mappings here. In this particular case, we're actually just setting the FD input on the AFP parser. So I'm just going to put in data to convert there. But some of the other things, like we saw earlier, we can set up where all the resource files are coming from. But we could actually set all that stuff up here in here as well. So it could be coming from a database, it could be coming from the file system. We could even pick it up off an FTP site or something along those lines if we needed to. But because it's all internal to the AFP, we're just going to, we don't need to set up any of that. I'm going to click over. I'm going to go over to the result xdocs here. And now we actually need to set up where are we actually going to write this to, or which location in memory are we going to write this to. So we're going to change the FD output right here, and we're just going to call this PDF. Okay. We do have the description here, which tells us what FD output means. We're setting the path and file name of the output PDF file, or we're just writing it to a place in memory. In this case, place in memory. Click OK. Now I just need to modify this file process so I can take that PDF. So once again, we'll just go into the mappings, and this actually resides in the result map, and we can see the PDF there. So I'm going to click OK and click OK. Now that's done, and I can actually run this file event just to test this out and just ensure that this is actually working before I push it into a production system or whatever else. Okay, so I'm just going to execute this file event by right-clicking on it and going to execute. And that's going to, in this log here, we can actually see what it's doing. Every 5 seconds, that's the default behavior. We could actually modify that if we only wanted to look every minute or every 2 minutes or maybe even once an hour. But in this case, we're actually searching every 5 seconds, and it's pulling that directory and it's saying, hey, we don't have anything there. What I'm going to do is I'm just going to go over into this into the file system here, and I'm going to copy this AFP over into the input directory. And that was fairly quick. It ran, and we can actually go into the log here, and it looks like we got an error, which is great, because that's what you like to happen during webinars. So what we can see here is what happened is it had a problem with this directory here. Couldn't actually find the path to that, which makes sense because we didn't put in the right directory. My bad. I'm just going to go through here. I could go through this wizard again if I wanted to, and just go into where that actually needs to be set up. Or I can just go into the properties here and add that here. So I'm going to add that in. Click OK, and hopefully that makes sense. And that won't error out this time. So I'm going to execute this again. Once again, we're starting over. We're going to poll every 5 seconds. The file's already in there. I'm just going to rename it. By renaming it, it's going to get picked up again. So testbank.afp, that's going to pick it up. It's going to go from _running to _finished. And now when I go into the log here, we can see that it actually completed successfully. And it took 350 milliseconds. Okay, just like before, we can see everything that's happened, but I'm not going to bore you with that. I'm just going to stop this. Now, if I go into that output directory, I should see that original output.pdf that we had earlier. You can see that that was created at 11:18. And 20 minutes later, we have this new output, the output.pdf, and we can see that it has this unique value on the end here, which really just so it doesn't overwrite the previous one. And if I open that up, I can see that the PDF has been written properly. I'm going to minimize that. And now what I'm going to do, now that I've created this project, and it's really simple, what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to deploy this into my configuration repository. And what the configuration repository allows us to do, it's kind of twofold. One, it allows us to store all our project files and everything else. So if I'm collaborating with team members, or or if I'm updating something, it allows for versioning and stuff like that. So it's just really just a central repository for project files for across the team, so I can collaborate with multiple people. For instance, all you folks on the phone here, I could actually, we could make this available to the web, so to speak, and you guys could actually download this. Of course, we haven't set that up because we just haven't yet. So if I go into Solution Manager here, I'm just going to create a new solution. So new, and I'm going to call this Web Training. I'm going to click OK. Now it's just asking us if we want to push in all those resources that we created, such as the info file, the sample files, the transformation project, and the process flow. So yeah, we want to put that in automatically. Just going to click yes here, and it's done. Now it's in there. So now that it's in there, one, it's available to your team, but it's also available to the server itself. So this has actually been deployed into an application server, production environment, so that it can now run constantly. So if I actually, so that's essentially the end there. I'm going to leave that. I'm going to go back to this PDF, though, just to kind of set up where we're going with the training series over the next couple training series. This PDF, it's 45 pages in length. So it's actually 15 statements, 3 pages apiece. We can see that the first statement is April Black, and all her information here. The next statement is Marie Cortez, and it kind of goes through that with 15 different people. What we're going to do in future training sessions is we're going to take this PDF and we're going to burst it out into multiple statements. We're going to do that by looking at this page, looking at the account number, and if the account number changes, we know we have a new statement. We're going to rename that. We're also going to look at some error handling. So earlier we had some issues with putting the wrong output directory, which actually wasn't on purpose, even though it kind of seems like it was. It was not on purpose, and really maybe we'll set up an email notification just to alert somebody when something like that happens. We're also going to load some repositories such as P8 or On Demand. We're going to show you how you can view those documents through a simple interface. So that's essentially all the training for today. Like I said, I mean, it's only 30 minutes of training, really just to familiarize yourself with Developer Studio and what we can do. And we'll actually start digging deeper into the product in future sessions, which I think are going to be the first Thursday of every month. I'm not really quite sure. Right, Tracy? Yeah? Okay, good.
If you have any questions, please feel free to drop it into the chat as described earlier. And we're going to be seeing if we have any right now.
And for the audience again, to ask a web question, simply click on the Q&A link at the top of your screen, type in your question, and then click on the Ask button. Again, any web questions that are not addressed within our available time frame will be answered by way of a post-conference email.
Okay, so it looks like we do have a question here. So Will, you were able to switch the fonts from the page view one by one on the Word, but is there a way to do it for all fonts without having to go into that view?
There is, actually. Yeah, I just did that as a simple way of doing it, but if we go back in here and I go into, this is, if you remember right from the beginning of the wizard, we set up the font correlation table. So if I go into the transformation here, what this actually sets up is this default font correlation table. So within here, I can actually map out all the fonts that I know actually exist. So if I go into the manage fonts, we'll just quickly run it, and it's going to populate this with all the fonts that are actually in there. So we can see that there's Helvetica Bold and Helvetica within the input AFP. And we can actually see how we're mapping that out to the PDF. And this can be reused across projects, as I mentioned earlier, or just for the one transformation project that we created here. So I'm just going to close this out.
Just to reiterate, we will have this presentation made available to everyone afterwards. We'll be sending an email out with all the information, with the audio and the recording. Will, we do have another question here. Do you plan to use PDF-A format?
We do, actually, and we actually already have that internal to the product. I don't think we have a separate generator for it. Oh, we do, actually. So PDF-A, as some people on the phone might know, PDF-A is a new standard set out, I think it was a couple of years ago, for archiving PDFs, so that we know PDF that's been created now can be read in 5 years, 10 years, or 100 years. So there's a couple different versions of the PDF-A standard, and we actually do have a PDF-A generator here, which enables that functionality.
Great, and we have one other question. Is there a migration path from D2E Vision to Xenos Developer Studio?
Yeah, there is actually. D2E Vision, all these projects are actually backwards compatible. I'm not quite sure how familiar you are with your D2E projects, but when you create the D2E projects, essentially you're just creating a configuration file. So within Xenos Developer Studio, we're actually using the same format for those configuration files. Now, there might be a couple things that might need to change, but for the most part, we should be mostly backwards compatible with what you've already created.
Okay, great. Looks like those are our questions for today. We do have some contact information. Should you have any questions, I believe we have a slide that we can share for that. So Will is available at this address as well. You can visit us on the web or follow us on Twitter. We also have an email, info@xenos.com, or even check out our blog, blog.xenos.com. Will is our Xenos evangelist and blog writer, so we look forward to hearing from you all. And we'll be sending, again, the presentation out as well as information for our next training webinar. Thank you.
Thank you so much. This does conclude today's Technical Thursday AFP to PDF Transformation Web Seminar. Thank you again, everyone, for attending, and have a wonderful day.